What if I told you for $200 you could get a unique speaker, one that you've never heard before, one that presents the music in its own unique way? Would you be interested in it? Sure you would be. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about one of the most unique, one of the most affordable, one of the most special speakers that I've ever put my ears on, but not literally on the speaker. I was sitting away from it. This is the WB4. It's a DIY speaker, okay? But listen, even though it's a DIY speaker, please hear me out. Stick around for a little while because it's a very easy DIY speaker because it's only a single driver. Now, before you just click off because you're like a single driver speaker, it can't be good. That's what I thought too. But surprisingly, it's really good. It's also built on a transmission line, which means you're getting a ton of bass out of this one single little driver. And there is no crossover, which means no soldering. Well, I guess you have to solder to get the leads from the binding post to the actual. So there's a little bit of soldering, but not a ton of soldering. And if you're not good at woodworking, Neil Blanchard from Neil Blanchard Designs will make you a flat pack for this, which means you can just glue it together, which means you don't have to cut the wood. Let's get to know this speaker a little bit more. Yay! Neil Blanchard is one of my patrons. He's been a patron of mine since the very beginning, and he's an engineer, I think, of some type, architect, something like that. Anyway, he builds speakers now, and he makes speaker upgrade kits from a crossover standpoint and even a construction standpoint. So he has kits for the Sony SSCS5. He has kits for the Emotiva B1 Plus. He has kits for a bunch of different speakers, but he also makes his own speaker design. And Neil's claim to fame is the utilization of transmission lines in his speaker enclosures. If you don't know about transmission lines, it's like a labyrinth. It's like a maze, corn maze. But instead of corn and you being in the maze, it's air coming out of your speaker through the maze. And it always comes out, so it finds its way. So it's not a very good maze. The point is that it makes the bass extend really, really low on very small drivers. This was a construction, a methodology, a design philosophy that was used in the past. But obviously, you have more wood in the enclosure, it's going to be a more expensive speaker. So most of the big speaker companies have moved away from a transmission line design. But not at Neil Blanchard's designs. Another thing that's different with Neil's products, by the way, his website is nbdesigns.work. He just sells you the plans. So he's not actually selling you the components, the crossover components, or in this case, the single driver. He's selling you directions, a manual on how to make it. This manual is $50. The drivers come in at $35 a piece. So at $120, you have $80 left to buy some wood. Now you're going to need glue and clamps and stuff like that. But if you're thinking about undergoing this project, you probably have most of that stuff already. And if you don't, it's not too expensive if you just roll down to Harbor Freight and buy some clamps, but those clamps will probably last maybe twice, so just get yourself some decent clamps. The driver they're using is a SounderLink Audiolabs model number DQ 40TZF-02. It's a 4-ohm version. Price of a pair of drivers is about $70 to $90, depending on where and when you buy them. It's the least complex speaker he's ever designed. And he also has an optional baffle step filter that you can build and put on this speaker, but that is going to increase the costs a little bit. This is how big it is. So it's a little bit big for desktop use, but if you do put it on a desktop, the driver hits you just about at ear level, which is kind of perfect. Fairly deep design. I was using these in the living room on a pair of stands. This is a tall speaker though, so if you are putting it on stands in a room, make sure that you get the right height of stands. Because with my stand, the driver was a little bit above ear level. I had these on a very expensive, the new Cambridge integrated amplifier. I also used these with the Weem Amp Pro, and we'll get into which one I think is the better choice for this speaker. But what I noticed straight away was that some songs sounded brilliant, and some songs, they didn't sound bad, but they didn't sound brilliant. They sounded okay. With Alanis Morissette, Uninvited, that song, whether it be the live version, the MTV Unplugged version, or whether it be the studio version, is a little bit sibilant in the way that it's recorded. This gave a whole bunch of mid-range detail, but there was no sibilance, or at least it was controlled a little bit, which tells me that the 4 to 6K region, fairly flat, if not recessed a little bit. Africa, the Weezer cover, did not agree with this speaker at all. There is a heavy bass drum at the beginning and then a lot of cymbals at the beginning. And the cymbals just seemed harsh, not natural, and just not very good. To be fair, this is not a very good recording though. Hello. Okay, let's talk about something good. Hello by Adele. It sucked you in. It made you want to lean into the music. And here's the thing about this speaker. I can tell, the reason I can tell is because I've listened to a lot of speakers. I can tell the mid-range may not have the same clarity as some of the other speakers, but the way that the speaker sounds, I feel like I'm getting clarity. But I also feel like it's sanding down some of the edges. So while Adele's voice was not crystal clear, it never seemed veiled at all, and it was very inviting. So opposite of Alanis Morissette, it wasn't uninvited, it was inviting. Wouldn't it be cool if Alanis Morissette released a new song called You're Invited? I don't think that's going to happen. No sibilance, no harshness in her voice. It's an inviting reproduction. That's what I wrote. Redemption song. The vocals, again, were just nuts. This speaker has a way of reproducing the music that is very unique, that I've never heard before. I did notice with Bob Marley that he seemed much more forward than the acoustic guitar. And I'm trying to figure this out because it's one driver, right? I feel like everything should be in line in the soundstage. But for whatever reason, the guitar seemed to be stepped back a little bit. And I did notice that it wasn't the airiest as far as the details in the acoustic guitar. But again, it was done in a way that I haven't heard before. And it was done in a very pleasing way. Think by Khalida, which still to this day, I do not know how this got into my Test Tracks playlist. I just don't get it. I don't remember putting it there. This is where you get to see some of the magic of this speaker. Because it's a single driver design, you get all the benefits of like a coaxial design, but it's better because it's just one speaker. So the soundstage, really the imaging is just really cohesive. I didn't feel like this speaker was layered in the soundstage from front to back, but as far as placement and space between and even outside the speakers, it was just like dead on. And again, it was a bit of a different reproduction of a song, and it does seem like a different type of speaker. It does seem like this isn't a traditional two-way speaker. And this song was actually very dynamic, which I thought this speaker was going to have some issues with dynamics. I didn't think it was going to be able to punch and then maintain itself on the top end in the mid-range, but it did with Think by Khalida. Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys. This is the song that separates the boys from the men, men from the boys, girls from the women. This is the great equalizer. And it did amazing. That song hits with the bass around 80 to 100 hertz. So this speaker rolls off around the enclosure is tuned to 40 hertz. But anyway, there's a lot of bass going on well above where this speaker kind of rolls off. And what was amazing to me is not only did this speaker handle it, there wasn't like any type of crazy bottoming out of the woofer, actually the driver, because it's only one driver. And it was one of this speaker's favorite songs. Well, the mid-range is pleasing and completely unoffensive. Anyway, it's not offensive. It's got a different tonality though. So it's got a different tonality than anything that I've heard. So I can't really compare this to the ELAC Debut 3s or the Emotiva XB1s or XB2s. It's different. It's really different. Very, very different. There is a bit of airiness on the top end, but it also seems simultaneously slightly rolled off. And in a way, that's not a bad thing because it takes a piece of sandpaper, not on the enclosure. By the way, this enclosure is made from Baltic birch, and there is something so satisfying about picking up a speaker that's actually made of wood. Granted, it's a bunch of veneer that's pressed together with some glue, but it's still wood. I made a bunch of speakers out of Baltic birch before, and I love it. You don't really need to finish it. You can put a little oil on it, teak oil, other oils, and it looks great, especially with these angled cuts. Wonderful, wonderful. Here's the bottom of that transmission line. Hello, hello. I don't hear the ocean. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the top end. Simultaneously airy, but yet a little bit rolled off. So it feels like it's knocking all the rough edges off of, well, bad recordings. So most recordings are going to sound good. Some are going to sound excellent. Some are going to sound a little bit neutered. But a lot of the issues with recordings I just didn't hear on these speakers. And if I was listening to this speaker in a vacuum, and if I've never heard another speaker before, I would think that this thing was awesome. It's just that I've heard speakers with folded ribbon tweeters. I've heard speakers with tweeters. The irony is that some speakers with tweeters don't sound as good as this speaker without a tweeter. The two things that this speaker can do that other speakers can't do is the cohesiveness because of the one driver. So mid-range cohesiveness, there's no handoff at a crossover point, and the amount of bass for the size of this speaker. As far as like linear rolled off bass, I've heard other speakers, like even the Sonys, can be a bit punchy at times, but they can't handle that extended bass. 40 hertz on a speaker of this size is just bananas. It's shocking. It's shocking how much bass this thing puts out for its size and the size of the driver. But it's true. It is shocking. I wasn't super optimistic when Neil asked me to do a video on this speaker. I have seen a lot of single driver speaker designs, and none of them were something that I was like, oh, I gotta get these in to listen to them. But Neil is a friend, Neil is a patron, and Neil designs very good speakers. And these are great. They're very different though, and I think if you're coming from a two-way speaker, this is going to be a different experience for you. But if you've got kids, if you've got grandkids, you got Thanksgiving coming up, you have the holiday break, Christmas and the like coming up at the end of December, this would be a wonderful project to do with the kids. It would be a wonderful project to do, period. These things do well on a desk too, but they're pretty big for a desk, so you probably need little stands next to your desk. They did play loud enough. I was getting them 75 and up. I didn't really push them very far because I didn't want to bottom out the driver. But if you put a high pass filter on these with a Weem amp or a Weem Ultra, you can really dial this in with a subwoofer and have a presentation that is just different and pleasing. And that's another reason why you might want to build this speaker, is because it does present in a different way because it's a single driver. What is your experience though with single driver speakers? Do you like them? Have you heard them? Which ones are your favorite? Put it down in the comments. Of course, this speaker is not going to be for everyone because you're building it yourself, but at $200, super affordable. It's going to give you the music. You're going to see the music through a different lens, which is kind of fun. And it does do things that other speakers don't do. If you like this video, check out another video I did about making an $80 speaker sound like a $1,000 speaker with Neil's brain. And if you want to become part of the best hi-fi community on the planet, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every Sunday night, some Sunday nights, we have patron Zooms. We also have a patron-only Discord and a patron-only Facebook group. I will link Neil's website here. That is not an affiliate link, which means I don't get any money if you give Neil money, but please give Neil money. Check out his upgrade kits. Those are around $20. His original designs start at $50, and I think this is the most affordable one, and it goes all the way up to $100. Like this video and subscribe.